Welcome to the MPG podcast, where your host, John Grabio, talks racing, driving, training, and cars with Newman Watts racing driver Jordan Missig. And now, here's John and Jordan.
MPG podcast. We are here at the MPG studios at the Audubon Country Club, Joliet, Illinois, and joined with Missig Performance Group driver and Newman Watts racing driver Jordan Missig.
Thank you, John. Nice to be with you again. Pleasure having you guys over as always. But wonderful to have you guys over once again. Be able to be speaking with you.
It's great. It's a Tuesday here after a big weekend here at the Missig Performance Group. Here is located, headquartered here at the Audubon Country Club in Joliet, Illinois. A full-time racetrack.
Yeah. Action-packed weekend for sure. Obviously, as it was month now switchovers to October, and we're getting towards the end of the year, so end of the racing season as well. So final weekend of racing here at the Audubon. So it was a really good turnout for everybody here at the club from a members standpoint. But I think it was a really good turnout in terms of like how many people actually came out and raced and the amount of racing action that we had throughout the weekend here. So pretty impressed, pretty excited, and it was a fun weekend for sure.
Yeah, there's the last official race weekend here for the season. The season will end of October here, and then season starts back up again in April of 2021. Mm-hmm. You are honing your skills this weekend. No F3 racing. That's going to be this weekend. Yep. Coming up, but you were honing your skills this weekend, keeping them sharp. Yeah,
just out having fun, obviously, but also staying in tune in some sort of race car here and there, just keeping myself going, knowing the understanding all the inputs of turning and braking, throttle inputs and everything like that. So just staying in tune, fine-tuning the skills and applying them on the racetrack here anywhere you can.
Yeah, when there's competition and there's a race car and the racetrack, Jordan Missig is there.
I try to be.
Chomping at the bit to get behind anything. So on Saturday you drove Radical.
Yeah, drove the Radical race out here on Saturday with a mix of some Pro Mazdas out here too. So was just kind of challenge myself a little bit to, obviously the Pro Mazdas are going to be much faster than a Radical, so just kind of honing my skills a little bit to try to keep up with them as best as I can. Try to stay in front of one of them, maybe two of them at best, but just kind of see where my pace would be compared to where they were.
Yeah, we spoke about this after the race. I thought it was interesting. It looked like they were, once that Pro Mazda, a lighter.
Yeah. Much lighter car.
Much lighter car. Open wheel where the Radical's closed wheel. Yeah, when those tires got warmed up, they were moving.
Yeah, they're flying. I mean, around this kind of a track, it took about 4 to 5 laps to get their tires warmed up. So once they got going, I think, it was kind of like a totally different pace and car. So they were able to catch back up to us and be able to battle with us and then eventually get around us and pull away a little bit. But I just tried as best as I could to kind of hang with them and produce as good of a lap time as I can to possibly be challenging with them.
Yeah, so you won the race.
Yes.
Won the race, and that concludes the championship series here.
Yeah.
And how'd you turn out in that one also?
So, I mean, I think I ended up winning the championship here. Going on to next year, I don't know if I'm going to be racing as much as I was this year. I think I'm going to take a step back from racing here and do a little bit more coaching-wise here at the club itself. But I think, next year we're going to look into probably going into Pro Mazda and doing some of that racing series. So kind of hone my skills a little bit more in open wheel style racing. So I think, the two different types of driving styles between a sports car and an open wheel car are two totally different things. So I think we're going to stick with more open wheel route, knowing that we're doing F3 next year.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Ed, you mentioned coaching, and you were on Friday. You started off the weekend Friday, probably.
Yeah.
Had a couple students out at the kart track.
Yeah, different layout for the kart track this weekend. Obviously, it's a layout that we are kind of used to. I would say that we 2 years ago ran almost every weekend, every race, but then the past 2 years now have kind of dipped away a little bit from it. So it was nice to kind of get back on that circuit a little bit and do a little bit of running on there. But yeah, some kids kind of forgot or never really ran that circuit before, so it was nice to kind of introduce them a little bit to it and kind of familiarize themselves back with the circuit.
Yeah, thanks to you. I mean, you had good success in the people that you coach down there at the kart track. They were pretty successful this year. And then we finished up Sunday, the race weekend, with what the first kart race that I can remember, we started dry and finished wet.
Yeah, no, actually it was the opposite way. I would say it started in the rain on slick tires and then kind of dried up as the race went on. So you can kind of tell a little bit. A lot of it was more of experience driving in that weather conditions. A lot of guys ended up turning the karts around in turn one and kind of spinning out. And then, as the race got on, the tires started to warm up a little bit and the track started to dry up a little. So you were able to push the tempo and push the pace a little bit more. And you could kind of see where people were finding speed and where people were still struggling. Yeah,
I noticed anything watching you race. You went out both the final and pre-final were on wets, right?
The pre-final was on dries. The final was on wets.
Yeah. Okay. So the pre-final it was interesting to watching you drive how you immediately took the rain line.
Yeah.
And that was offering a great deal of success. I mean, you and one of your students took the rain line, and everybody else was staying kind of in the middle or on the regular race line.
Yeah.
And it could tell your experience and what you imparted to, one particular student that you have listened to you and followed your rain line, and it worked out pretty well for him. And then, once you got on rain tires, it was straight normalish line, right?
Normalish line from the rain line itself, but yeah, he put up a good fight with me. I was really impressed, really proud of what he was able to do, and just made a little mistake here in the race, but was able to battle back from it. So that's kind of what I started doing. I always made mistakes, but always would battle back, find my way back up to where I would think I should have been or could have been better. But it's just kind of limiting those mistakes from there. It's what makes you better.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great opportunity to see that race. It was just unique and fun. One thing that I know that my personal family has leaned on you a lot through this season is looking at data and taking the data from these little machines that we have in our cars and karts that give us a massive amount of speed, braking, acceleration, cornering aspects, and we break that down. You're very helpful in sharing that information and trying to coach and delve through it, because it's just numbers in a graph.
Yeah.
It's very you really have to get in tune with looking at how this displays on we take it from a little machine, we put it into a computer, it runs some data, and then we look at that. How do you look at that? How important is it at the beginning level as you go up? As we mentioned, we all love karting. As we go from karting into sports cars, which you have a lot of experience at, into this, super awesomely cool F3 car. Mm-hmm. I mean, how does that data equate? Is it all the same, or how do you look at it differently or approach it differently?
Well, from like a karting standpoint, there's a limited amount of things that you can look at. Obviously, you can look at maybe mile per hour here and there based on the Micron system or any kind of system that you use, whether it's AIM or Micron or whatever it is. You can look at it through either speed, or some people use RPM-wise. Mainly it's RPM because those are the only sensors that you're really going to get is from the engine and the motor. Mm-hmm. That goes through the Micron. And then from there, it kind of, you're through the Micron itself or AIM system, it's learning the track. So it kind of puts a picture of the map of the track itself, and then you could throw it on where you're going to read data, your data analysis system. And then from there, you could see which part of the track you're maybe losing time, where you could be gaining time. And then there's what we call a reference point, which takes the fastest lap that you posted, and then whatever lap you kind of align with that lap, it shows if you're gaining or losing based on if it's going below the reference line or above the reference line. And you can kind of tell there if you're losing speed, if you're gaining speed, where time's lost or time's being gained. And then when you kind of go from there and go to, like, let's say a sports car or an open wheel car, that's when it gets a little bit more complicated. You're dealing with a lot more things compared to where a go-kart you're dealing with maybe 2 or 3 things. So now when you're looking at a sports car or an open wheel aim dash system that you're looking at for data wise, it's more of just straight squiggly lines. And that's where people kind of get a little bit more confused on, like, what am I supposed to be looking at here and there? And what we see is speed. What people see is just squiggly lines, as I like to put it. So it can go between, wheel speed sensors that are inside the car, which judges like what kind of speed you're producing through the wheel speed, your throttle trace, brake trace, gear that you're going through, RPM, TPS sensor, which is also how much throttle input you're putting in. and then also back to the reference line that I was putting at too. So that's kind of like the main components that you look at when you're looking at data. But all those things, you know, when you put it all together, it creates a boatload of speed that you just never knew you had or you could find.
So, so at your level, you have a set person who just does all your data, right?
Yeah.
On your race team now?
So, I mean, we have driver coaches, we have data analysis. Some teams maybe have engineers that are dedicated to a specific driver, specific car based on the race team. What we have is I have a driver coach who kind of understands and goes to, like, whenever we're on track, seeing what we're doing, and then looks at the video, and then we'll go back to the data to see, you know, what I could be doing wrong and compare it to maybe my teammate or anybody else that's on track to kind of see, you know, where I'm gaining speed, where I'm losing speed, where I need to work on, or where I'm killing everybody at, or where I'm getting killed itself. So I think, you know, when you have someone, especially when you have a second pair of eyes that is maybe outside the cockpit of the car and is just kind of looking at the computer screen and not what you're thinking, is beneficial to you, because he gives you another set of eyes, another set of opinions, another set of heads to kind of work together with, and it could kind of point out some things that you maybe didn't even think of or didn't even know about when you were inside the race car at the time.
Yeah, do you know how many, like in the F3 car, do you know how many data points that it's collecting, or data fields, I guess you might say, or inputs?
I mean, it's obviously collecting every lap. Once just the car starts to get RPM, it starts to trigger itself until you turn the car off and the main power switch off as well. So, I mean, it's collecting data almost everywhere you drive. So at that point, there's always going to be, you need like a beacon or like something at the start-finish line to tell you that it's a different lap. Otherwise, it's just going to be continuous as one single lap. So I think if you have a sensor that kind of tells you when it starts a new lap, or have a beacon that's out there that tells you your lap time and everything, then you know the system's working. Because if the beacon, or you're not getting lap times at all, you're not getting data. Or you're getting data, I should say, but it's not accurate data, and you have to manually go in and find out the points itself, which could potentially not be accurate, whereas it does it automatically if the system's all hooked up and working properly.
So what's the main, I assume speed is probably the main thing you're looking at, or is braking, I mean, is
really what we're looking at a lot is kind of at what we call a time slip, which is kind of the difference. It's kind of like compared to the reference line, to where how much time you're gaining in some places, where as much time you're losing. And then you kind of just dissect it from there. So first off, you're looking at where's your biggest loss, where's your biggest gain, and then just kind of once you find out where your biggest loss is mainly, you'll dissect into where, you know, are you braking too early, are you braking too late, are you braking enough, or are you braking too much? And then from there, you just kind of find out, from when even if you're comparing against someone else or comparing against yourself, how much lap time you actually lost, or how much like time you're losing in this specific area. So sometimes you could be braking a little bit, like not as much, but you could be on the brake as less, and that can kind of equal it out. Or, you know, you could be on the brake a lot harder, but you're braking a little bit too early, and that can all accumulate to lap time wise, especially when you get how you get back on the brakes to how you get back on the throttle, and how much speed you're rolling through the middle of a corner could determine if you're gaining 2/10 out of the corner, or if you're losing 2 to 3/10 on the exit.
How difficult is that? I mean, I'm sure there's a fine line between it. How difficult is that to recognize from looking at that data? I mean, is that something that you have to have multiple overlays of different laps to really sense, or if somebody's really good at this, can they just look at the data and go, hey, I know exactly what's wrong here?
Generally, you reference about 2 to 3 laps, your fastest 2 to 3 laps put together, to see if, you know, if it was better. And then sometimes, you know, you may feel like, oh, I did this corner a lot better in this lap, but I didn't have a good lap overall. So then you'll take that lap, plug it in, and then compare it to where your fastest lap was to see if you did get better in that specific area. So there's more to it than just the whole lap together. You may be dissecting little bits and pieces of corner here and there. Say you got a better exit off one corner, did it help you down at the end of the straightaway in terms of speed-wise? Or say, you know, your braking was much better in this lap, in this corner, but you messed up on the exit. Can we just check and see if the braking was much better, and if you gained any time by braking a certain way? So, I mean, you could dissect the littlest pieces if you wanted to from each lap that you're out in practice, or when you're ever on track, to kind of determine if this was better or if it wasn't.
Yeah, I noticed that when I have seen you coaching, and I always have an ear and you know, to what's going on, and then ask you if I could join in that coaching session to kind of watch how you're working with the driver. And I think that your ability to articulate, you know, those data points when you guys are looking at data and how that relates not just to what's on the computer screen, but how you actually take that into the car and make things happen. I mean, it's one thing to say, you know, brake later, but how do you brake later, right? I mean, how do you turn sooner? How do you turn? I mean, it might sound simplistic, but I mean, it's not. If you're max performing what you think the vehicle is, I have noticed that you're able to use different words in a different sequence to maybe raise that driver's awareness of what's going on.
Yeah, and it's just like any other sport that you look at. You look at baseball, it's like type of swing. You look at golf, it could be a type of golf swing. Or basketball, it's type of, how should I say, your technique on how you shoot a basketball or something like that. It's just all about the technique and kind of how you use, like what kind of form you use to apply for, in racing, brake or throttle. You know, there's a certain brake trace that we look for, which I like to call as a backward, it's a slide, I like to call it, as where the brake trace should go straight up at the highest peak initially, which should be the first thing when you apply the brake pedal should be your hardest pressure that you push, and then slowly bleed off as you get towards the corner to release more the brake pedal a little bit more to kind of roll that minimum speed through the corners. And so when you look at a data graph, it should look straight up and then just kind of slowly trickle down to where you're not having any pressure at all. Because here's the biggest cause is that people think, well, why don't you just keep your foot on the brake? When it comes to that, you need to have ABS, obviously, and that's the anti-brake system locking up. So it doesn't cause the front brakes to lock up. Whereas if you kept your foot on the brake the entire time, eventually you would chatter the rears or you would lock the front rear tires up, and next thing you know, you're just locking up and you're not taking speed off, you're just going straight off. And you're just hurt the tires a lot more and just kind of flat spotting it eventually. So there's always a fine line, and I found this out last year too. There's a fine line between the brake pressure and the way the wheel speed of the tires itself. So the tire is moving at a certain RPM when you're going at full speed. And then when you hit the brakes as hard as you can at the very initial pressure, it's so hard to lock the tires up initially because it's already carrying enough RPM and enough speed that no matter how hard you were to hit the pressure, it can't slow it down that quick. But then once you start, the reason why we bleed off is because as you slow the speed of the tire down, you start to create the little bit of degree to where the tires can lock, and it's starting to catch up to the brake pressure. And eventually, if you hit that threshold, the tire's going to eventually lock. So you try to keep the brake pressure above the fine line of where the tire could start to lock up, so that way you don't cause lock in the front tires.
Can you feel that, or is that something you develop as a feel, or is that something that's independent of? You have to do it in a car to see where that limit is?
That's something that happens in the feel. Obviously, you feel the brake pressure itself. You could feel within your leg of the pedals. You could feel the pressure of the pedals when you apply the brakes. And you can tell when you feel the locking up of the brakes, the pedal starts to feel light. And the front tires, you could feel locks up and you'd have no speed, like you're not taking the speed out. Whereas if you keep the brake pedal on a constant pressure and then start to bleed off on it, you could feel the tires start to slow up. You could feel the brake pressure continue to stay on the front brakes, and it's slowing the car down. So you could feel all that just between your feet and the pedals.
Interesting. I think that's really valuable, especially for working with a team. You know, I talk to a lot of race car drivers a lot, and I mean, it is, I think, one of your. What is your college degree again?
Communications and media arts. So yeah, communications is one of my degrees. So, you know, being able to kind of explain it a little bit. I'm not probably the best when it comes to like explaining in terms of terminology, when it comes to like saying like the right words and everything. But when it comes to explaining and like showing what's actually like what needs to be done and like truly going in depth into the information, that's one of my strong suits, is kind of truly explaining the proper feedback.
I think that is really accentuated in what happened this weekend with a young driver that had a problem and couldn't effectively communicate what the problem. He knew that there was a problem with his. We were talking about a cart here.
Yeah.
There was a problem with the cart. He knew there was a problem with the cart, but he did not know what that problem was. He'd never experienced it before. And within a matter of 3 questions, you had that issue pinpointed, and now he was able to take that to his mechanic and get that fixed.
Yeah.
And I think that goes to your ability to understand driving vehicles, whether it's a kart or an F3 car, to be able to get to the core problem quickly and easily. And boy, that's the guy you want on your team. I mean, you want that driver that knows, that can come in, that can articulate that quickly, so that the fix could get done quicker and you can get faster sooner.
Yeah, and most drivers, most drivers will be able to find something, but it's the drivers who can find the littlest bits and pieces that could possibly affecting the car and could potentially be something wrong. Like, you could look at a car and say, oh, nothing's wrong with it, but a driver could jump in and drive it and be like, oh yeah, there's totally something wrong with this. And it's like, mechanically wise, it looks fine. But then when you try to feel the car at speed, there could be something out that you're feeling, but you can't actually see it. And sometimes for drivers, it's very hard to describe what could actually be the problem. They just kind of go off of feel, and they just had to explain the feel of the car as best as they possibly can. And eventually they kind of, they will get to the problem eventually if they find it. So when I was asking one of my students on what he was doing, it was, he was feeling a vibration in the cart. Well, I said, all right, well, where was the vibration? Do you feel it in the front or the rear? And he says, he really couldn't tell. So I was like, all right, well, do you feel it in the seat of your pants, or do you feel it in the steering wheel? And he said he felt it in the seat of his pants. So I'm like, all right, well, the steering wheel's connected to the front, so it's not the front. It has to be towards the rear. And then I asked him if it was in the front of the seat or in the rear of the seat, and he said it was more towards the rear. And it's kind of processing and elimination of what could be the potential problem. And eventually I said it was probably a bent axle. And turned out it was.
And it was, yeah. It was neat to watch. I'm glad I was in the area to see that transpire and take place, and bring it to the listeners as we talk about it. This weekend, COTA, Circuit of the Americas.
Yes.
That's the only acronym I know that we use the O from of.
Yes. The O of the of, yes.
The Circuit of the Americas, COTA, down in Austin, Texas.
Well, no, there is Circuit of Gilles Villeneuve up in Canada, but we won't go into that discussion.
Okay.
I just wanted to point that out. So yeah, Circuit of the Americas down in Austin, Texas.
Circuit of the Americas, and pretty exciting weekend.
Yeah, no, it's the final weekend of the FRAmericas Championship Series powered by Honda out there for the F3 Series. A good track that I've been to. I had a lot of success at last year with the Radical Sports Cars, so I'm looking forward to going back to that track. It's definitely one of those tracks that has a lot of sweeping corners with the S's at the very first part of the track, which then turns into a long straightaway down the backside, and then a little bit stadium section, which I'm always a fan of as well. So looking forward to getting down to Austin, Texas to be able to drive this F3 car out there and see what we're able to do.
Standard load-in day Thursday?
Yep, standard load-in day Thursday, 2 practice sessions Friday, qualifying on Saturday with 1 race in the afternoon on Sunday, and then 1 race in the morning, 1 race in the afternoon on Saturday, 1 race in the morning on Sunday, and then 1 race in the early afternoon on Sunday as well.
Well, good luck. We can watch the race via
FanRacing.live. It's the Formula Americas network, so it's FanRacing.live on your URL, or you can always just check in on the FRAmericas page, Newman Walks Racing or Jordan Missick Racing pages to get all the info on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram to watch all the info and see what happens.
All right. Google, fastest way, Google Jordan Missick Racing.
Yes,
you can get every single thing there, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, JordanMissickRacing.com?
Yes, that too as well, on the website as well. So everything's just right there. If you Google Jordan Missick, it's within like the first 4 or 5 searches. So everything's right there as
Pretty active Facebook page. You can see that and log in. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, do that.
Yes.
Subscribe and join. How do we say that on Facebook? You
can follow, like, follow or like. Yeah.
Follow
you can like on Facebook, follow on Twitter and Instagram. How about that? Simple enough, right?
Well said, 20-something person.
22.
22-year-old person. Thanks for watching the MPG podcast. I'm John Graybill, joined
by Jordan Missick. And one thing before we go, I need to thank my sponsors at Missick Performance Group and Audubon Country Club for doing an amazing season for Audubon, as well as coming on board with us at Jordan Missick Racing throughout this 2020 FRAmericas season, and hope to be with you guys for 2021.
All right. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, guys.